to take this opportunity to say thanks to the CFA Society for actually putting the event together. It means a lot for the community. So just on that note, we've heard a lot of technical stuff in the morning, but I thought it would be interesting to see what's happening in the wider community. At the end of the day, it all comes down to what do we do with all these learnings from today. So individually, I think we're all involved in some shape or form in building communities. So for example, last year I put an event together quite selfishly because I was feeling a bit lonely in the startup world. Just wanted to know who else is in the space. So put the event together, I had 160 people turn up and it was a lot of fun. Now, Mark is involved in the blockchain space, Mitch has been involved in the wider FinTech space, and Stu has been involved in the AI forum as well. So I'm going to throw it open to Mark and to each of you after that to tell me what's driving you in your particular sector, what's interesting.
I think in my case, I run a software company 3 months for 17 years now, and sort of drank the blockchain Kool-Aid about 3 years ago. Went to a conference in Queenstown, and kind of, yeah, blockchain is a bit like a religion. You kind of you see the light, and then you want to convert everybody else. And that's really what happened to me. I kind of saw the wider potential. The conference I went to, it wasn't a tech conference. It was a really interesting, diverse set of people who really wants to change the world. And yeah, once I understood the basics of it, I began to realise it was much more than technology. It was a way to actually fundamentally re-architect many of our systems. The way the internet has evolved has actually got to quite a dangerous place, in my opinion. It's become too centralised. We have one taxi company, one accommodation provider, one retailer. So that is dangerous in so many ways. These organisations know far too much about us, and they're effectively monopolies, and they're becoming, as we move more and more to this global marketplace. So so a lot of us at that conference, and many conferences I've been to since, kind of realised that the blockchain does provide a mechanism, a tool, a protocol to start re-engineering the internet to be more decentralised, to give back, there's a lot of talk before about ownership of data. The blockchain is this enabling technology to allow us to own our own data. And there's a fascinating project or a research paper that was recently published called the datacommons.org.nz by a guy called James Mansell. He presented at the conference last week. And John Key actually mentioned it on a radio interview the other day, so it's gone up to his level, so he's supporting that approach. So bringing back the idea of data commons, so that data becomes a shared resource, and so we're hoping to kick that project off soon. So so really got excited about that point, and then since then really been on a bit of a journey. So we run the meetup groups, we've organised 2 conferences, we've set up Blockchainlabs.nz as kind of vehicle to allow that collaboration, because what we're finding is we're having lots of different conversations with different organisations, banks, ag tech company or whatever, and we're kind of realising, well, you guys need to talk to you guys, you need to work with you, and perhaps we need to get some regulation change here. So we need to bring a whole bunch of people into a room together to actually do something that could benefit New Zealand Inc. and possibly the globe. So,
fantastic. Stu, do you want to talk about AI?
Yeah. AI, yeah. Okay, yeah. Thanks also for having me here today. AI. So I guess there's a lot of you in this room who would be familiar with that concept of the second half of the chessboard, right? Okay, so peasant goes off to an emperor. The emperor says, "You've done well, what would you like?" He said, "I just want one piece of rice, and I want it to double every time it goes on the chessboard." And the emperor thought, that's fine, so get into that. But by the time it got to the end, the emperor was completely bankrupt, and you had a pile of rice larger than Everest, okay? So that's what we're up against in terms of technology across the board. And many of us in this room have seen the wave from e-commerce through to TCPIP, Web 1.0, Web 2.0, mobile, social, Metcalfe's Law, all that stuff, yeah? We've seen it all, Internet of Things, big data and all that sort of stuff. So that's all coming together, okay? But it's the combination of all that stuff, and it's the combination of all that stuff and the computing power that you've got now, which is making the industry look at artificial intelligence as being not the next wave, but the biggest wave, which is going to be impacting society as a whole, economy and society. And that's why Google puts it as its number one priority in terms of the future. That's why Amazon Web Services, or Amazon, have declared themselves wanting to be AI as a service, the primary AI as a service operator in the world. That's why Bill Gates only yesterday said that if he was going to university now, he would be studying AI, which is kind of interesting because he actually never got a degree in the first place. But so all those things, so the priorities there, and you say, well, why do they find it, why is it a priority, you know? Why is this a priority? Because there's huge amounts of opportunity out there. There's huge amounts of opportunity to change things, to be able to make the world a better place, to be able to drive economic benefit through to people. However, the other thing is that there's a huge number of structural changes which have occurred since 1.0, Web 1.0, which has come through over the last X amount of time, which is things like demonetization, zero margin economics, concentration of power, some very strong market forces which are in place, which are actually going to be driving our society moving forward based on the fact that you've got this big movement going on, okay, and it's going to just accelerate. And AI is going to be part of that, and with machine learning, with deep learning, with all this sort of stuff going on, that we actually, as a nation, have to actually take a view as to how we're going to address this, and not just fall in and take a reactive approach towards what we're doing. So there's a public-private coalition together, which is the AI Forum in New Zealand. It's got the government on board. It's got all the universities on the board, represented by a Vice-Chancellor. We've got people from the social side. We've got legals. We've got Francis Valentine, who's, taking PhDs to another level and flexibility. We've got a whole bunch of people. We've got corporates. We've got the tech giants on board. We're across with the Partnership of AI in the States, because we actually care about NZ Inc. and we actually care about what we're going to be doing in this next generation of our society, and we want to make sure that we've actually got a conscious approach towards how we're going to address this challenge for us, both the good stuff and bad stuff. There's plenty of good stuff out there, and so in FinTech, you've got stuff like predictive analytics, you've got machine learning to lower the cost of production, you've got, all sorts of, you've got probably one of the best interface shops in the world just around the corner here, doing BabyX, just doing, next generation interactions with people. So there's, we're going to get disrupted in the transport industry. We're going to get disrupted in our education industry. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why people are actually starting to think we need to do something about this. We need to move forward. So we've got together as a group with the AI Forum. What we're doing is we are going to do a national stock take of what we're doing. We've got the government behind us to actually fund that. We're then going to get that internationally benchmarked, and we're going to be going back out to NZ Inc. and saying, well, these are the key planks which we see are important for New Zealand to be able to move forward, to be able to address these opportunities, and then we're going to influence policy, drive better capability inside our tertiary educations, and create far better economic outcomes and social outcomes for us, because there's a whole lot of things which are still out there which are unresolved. For example, technological unemployment is heading our way, costing out of big organisations. There'll be people out of the transport industry which will not have jobs. You've got to have a reiterative training force for people to be able to retrain in their lifetimes. All those sorts of things need to be addressed for us as a country to maintain our competitive position moving forward. And other countries are building national strategies. That's what we want to be able to do here. So that's why we've joined, that's why we've created the AI Forum in New Zealand.
Mitch, you've got a broader view of FinTech in general. Your views on the community?
Sure. I'll give you a bit of a personal background that kind of led me here as well, and then a community industry background. Now, I've been in business in the IT space for 25 years or so, and I've been involved with many IT projects to support financial businesses and financial innovation over that period of time. And things like, back in the days of AMP, Ergo, we were building a turnkey banking system right through to when we put online, one of the first insurance quoting online with motor vehicle quoting back in the day. That was really innovative back then, right through to internet banking with ASB and so on, and NZI and various other. There's a wide range of innovation that the financial services sector, which is very diverse, all the way from banking, insurance, finance, capital market, have always been innovating with technology. And so that in itself is not new, and I've seen my share of that. But today, the world is very, very different. Even a few years ago, when we were involved with developing a system to support IAG to kind of manage claim risk, around the rebuild of Christchurch. Even as recent as that, the world has completely changed today. Today, organizations can no longer innovate within themselves, trying to raise the competition, trying to build a slightly better system and what have you. Those days are over because today every single organization, large or small, is surrounded by not just internal but also external innovators. And the technology environment is completely open for that, so the world has changed. Firstly, which kind of gave me that personal view of things and say, well, we need to do things differently. And then from the business community or technology industry community perspective, when I got involved as chair of NZ Tech, I learned that New Zealand has a very thriving tech sector that's made up of around about 29,000 tech companies. Now, I didn't know that before I became chair of NZ Tech, and that was great. That's very exciting. It is the fastest, growing sector across our economy. And then also I found out that FinTech actually has been growing in the last few years at the rate of 31% per annum. Now, that's completely unheard of across any other sector. But if you ask me, well, okay, great, this is fantastic. So who's doing what in FinTech? I say, well, I have no idea. I talk to everybody else, and nobody else has any idea either. But, there's anecdotes everywhere. There's Binu's company, there's all sorts going on, and there's blockchain happening, and there's all sorts of really cool things. So when I kind of wearing the head of the chair of NZ Tech, looking at this part of the tech sector and seeing no visibility, and combined with my kind of personal view and awareness of the whole world has changed all around financial services providers. That kind of gave me the drive, the intention to get together with a bunch of others to create what we now have as FinTechNZ. We specifically call this kind of group the New Zealand Financial Innovation and Technology Association, because we want to acknowledge that financial innovation has been happening all along, and it is what creates the need for technology. Because technology, we're not creating technology just for the sake of creating technology. It's because there's needs. There's business needs, there's customer needs, there's marketing needs, there's all sorts of other needs. So anyway, we then got together as a group of around 25 organizations, including FMA and Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment, and some of the banks, insurers, finance, tech companies, FinTech companies, insurtech companies. And then we launched FinTechNZ back in February. And it's been quite amazing. Somehow it only took a few people to kind of get things started, and the others kind of came out of the woodwork and all wanted to join, and everyone's been saying that, look, we've been wanting to do this for a long time, and it's great now that somebody's kind of just got it started, and so let's get together and actually build this whole community for New Zealand. And it is a very, very inclusive approach. We deliberately want it to be inclusive because we really want to encourage not just technology innovation that have come from outside, but we want to encourage the financial services sector to continue to innovate, but just in smarter and different ways today compared to 20, 25 years ago. And so we've got quite a big working group now, and we've got initiatives right across different kind of segments of banking, insurance, finance, and we recognize also that a lot of technology innovation actually impact multiple aspects of financial services. So again, we also need to see things in new ways, so that this is not about a banking system. This is not about a wealth management or insurance or finance system. We have to collectively look at this is a solution that will make this possible for the consumer, or that will make this possible for small businesses to access such and such, and so on. So combine all of that together. There's a lot for us to do. There's a lot of us getting together in FinTechNZ doing various different initiatives, and our objective is kind of threefold. First of all, within the first kind of maybe 18 months, we really want to focus on connecting the FinTech community, kind of bring everyone out in the open, connecting everyone together, and creating synergies within that community and grow that community. The second objective is to promote. So once we start to see and know who's doing what, we can actually start to promote FinTech, not just within its own community, but to the public, to the regulators, and also to international communities. And then the third objective is over the next little while, we would also like to develop what we'd call the FinTech agenda for New Zealand, with as many diverse voices contributing to that agenda as possible. And with that agenda, we can then look at how we can actually build a better or a most effective ecosystem for FinTech innovation in New Zealand, be it with regulators, be it with looking at how perhaps banks can work and be more accessible to FinTech startups, or insurers with insurtech startups and those kind of things. And then also, once we have once FinTechNZ is part of the New Zealand Inc. and part of the New Zealand technology story, it is also easier for us to access international communities and international markets for our innovation here as well. Because ultimately, what we believe also is that for New Zealand to have a really good FinTech ecosystem for FinTech innovation, we have to be part of the global ecosystem, because ultimately we don't want to just innovate for 4.5 million people. So these things are really important. The latest thing that we're working on right now is we're in the middle of negotiating an MOU with FinTech Singapore. We've been approached by FinTech Australia and Hong Kong, UK. We're connecting with Israel and the US. So as soon as we kind of created ourselves into an accessible kind of community and put that out into the open, not only everyone from within New Zealand have been coming out and joining, but then we become visible and accessible, and others from the international community have been reaching out to us as well. So that's really where we're at today.
The questions are coming in again, so sorry to sort of butt in, but I'll have a few, and then if you've got a couple that you can ask too. And it's a really interesting one that, from a slightly different tack to some of the other questions that we've heard so far today, it's will technology actually drive inequality over the coming years as large swathes of the population get left behind? So who'd like to have a go at that particular one? Yes.
Yeah, I'll answer that.
Please, yes.
Yeah, there's definitely, we're seeing it right now, like a spread of wealth and income, and technology is just going to accelerate that. And I see this pretty much, there was a model built up by some intellectuals in the early or mid-1990s, which actually racked Porter's 5 forces with deregulation, with internationalisation, and with technology as the new forces driving and changing economies. And what you've actually seen, if you fast forward over 30 odd years or whatever, you've actually seen in terms of the emerging economies, you've seen a big growth of the middle class. And you're seeing that because of international trade and because of them upskilling their stuff, and all the technology is making it easier for people to do stuff and stuff like that. However, in the developed societies, what you're seeing is a hollowing out of the middle classes. Okay, you're seeing this comes back to the concentration issue I was talking about earlier. But you're getting this concentration of wealth at the top end and at the bottom end, and you've got to be asking yourself, you fast forward another 20 or 30. In fact, the inequality now, and Thomas Piketty is a fantastic author on this stuff here, but like if you actually look at that stuff now, and the inequality is greater than what it was prior to the French Revolution. And if you fast forward at this rate here moving forward, you've got to ask yourself, what are you going to be doing? If you've got wealth management guys out here, like, where's the wealth to manage? There might be, you only need one guy to actually look after the half dozen people who've got the wealth. And what are you going to do with the rest of the people who are actually, not creating wealth? So the answer is yes, technology is driving inequality. And it is one of those big questions which needs to be addressed.
Is there anything that can be done to tackle it too? And, sorry, you go first, and then we'll.
I'm just going to add to that.
No, please do. Yes.
I was just going to sort of add to that, but also answer, divert the conversation a little bit, because
Yes.
just some of the questions I had at tea break made me realise this might be quite interesting for a lot of people. At the moment, there's this whole parallel universe going on around blockchain-based organisations. So just, I'll back up a bit. So a Bitcoin as a currency or an asset class, that's debatable. Then we've got this platform called Ethereum, which has been built as a blockchain-based platform to build anything on. And people are building organisations on the Ethereum platform. These are blockchain decentralised organisations, and they are doing ICOs, initial coin offerings. So instead of raising money from investors or IPOs, these guys are literally putting their white paper or their software on the blockchain and saying, hey, this is our big idea. And here's a coin. We're going to create our own currency. If you like it, you buy our currency. And these guys are raising. This is a blog I wrote recently. So Golem raised, decentralized computer raised 10 million in 30 minutes. Quantum raised 12 million in 90 minutes. Singular DTV, a decentralized Netflix raised. This world is going on, and it's accessible to anybody. It's I bought this stuff. You just need an app, and you need some ether, and it's all going outside the regulators and the lawyers. Everything is all probably going to be challenged at some point, but it's happening. They're raising ridiculous amounts of money, and as fund managers, my feeling is that most New Zealanders are missing out on this gold rush. Even the platforms like Ether and Bitcoin, they've gone up a ridiculous amount over the last 12 months. But on top of these platforms are these other things, which as fund managers, I think should be part of people's portfolios, because they're high risk, but there's huge gains to be made in these worlds. But looping that back to sort of inequality, yes, I'd like to think that this parallel universe, which I think is going to be the way forwards, it's going to leave behind the old world quite quickly. It should should help inequality. It should help anybody, because anybody can partake in this world. You don't need a fund manager. You don't need to know about stock exchanges. You just buy the stuff, and you're part.
Sort of like a microfinance type.
Yeah, you can just buy a few coins of this token that you now own. It's on your wallets. I mean, on my wallet here, I've got sort of 6 tokens. I've got I've got my keys to my thing, and so on my smartphone or anywhere. So that world is now existing and gaining a lot of momentum.
Yeah, got a quick question with blockchain itself. Going back to your earlier session, I picked up there's quite a lot of questions on blockchain. So one of the things I came across an IBM survey from last year, which said by 2020, nearly 66% of global banks would have some shape of blockchain that they're using. Having said that, there's particular challenges both around legislation and standardization, right? So how far have you got to in that standardization process?
That's emerging. So Australia they've won the contract to essentially lead the sort of global standards definition of blockchain, and so New Zealand want to sort of get a part of that process. I think MB are sort of trying to get in on that. So there is some standardisation going on. I think it's probably worth just emphasising there's what a lot of the banks are doing is using private blockchains. So when they said that they're doing a lot of R&D to sort of make the horse go a bit faster, using blockchain technology to do sort of interbank transfers and all that sort of stuff, but that the much bigger disruption, which I think we touched on before, is actually, startups eating away at the bank's core business, and the barrier to entry is far lower than it's ever been, and I think that's where the disruption is going to be. So yeah.
Right. And on the flip side, when you look at the legislative challenge, what do you think New Zealand can do better to promote the sector?
The blockchain space? Or,
blockchain space, yeah.
Yeah.
What are we missing? I mean, what have you seen overseas that
what we see overseas is the legislation process is simply too slow.
Right.
So the countries who have legislated, by the time it goes through, the world's changed.
They've got a new thing.
And Australia made some crazy laws a while ago around capital gains on Bitcoin and that sort of thing, and they've just pulled back on that just last week. So actually, New Zealand was kind of ahead on the sort of crypto-friendly nations for a while. Because we just didn't do anything.
Right.
We just put our head in the sands. So the whole problem is the rate of change and the legislation process. It's just not. They're never going to keep up. So I foresee this parallel world just emerging that's outside of the local legal jurisdictions, and it's just going to flourish. And I'm not sure anybody's going to be able to stop it.
Right. So. And so, Mitch, you've got a lot of connections into Asia as well. So what are you seeing in those markets that we haven't started doing yet, for want of a better way to put it?
I think speed is probably the theme. I think Asia is picking up FinTech at amazing speed. I mean, putting aside where today China is probably kind of number one in the world in the e-commerce part of FinTech. But when you look at Hong Kong and Singapore with these FinTech hubs and lots of investment that go into FinTech innovation, tech innovation as a whole, but certainly FinTech innovation, absolutely. So we see there's more and more kind of a very diverse range of ideas that materialize as FinTech solutions and systems and apps and things like that, right across the board, from traditional type of services to new types of services, like say, for example, peer lendings and things like that, popping up all over the place. Lots and lots of investment capital going into those kind of innovation, but also very, very strong interconnected kind of channels to market. It's much easier to innovate when you're already right there in the middle of 300 million people in Indonesia, for example, to roll out your product, as opposed to 4.5 million people in New Zealand. And it's quite interesting too, because even though Singapore has so much investment capital to invest and try to attract companies into Singapore, but a lot of the investment in FinTech in Southeast Asia is actually from Singapore into various other markets to really fuel the growth and speed of FinTech innovation. So speed is one thing. Second thing is that, again, the innovations are very, very broad in scope, or very international in scope. So while they're very large local markets, innovators still very much have the region or the global kind of market as part of their roadmap. So we see a lot of that as well. But I think the thing that strikes me the most is the level of, whenever I kind of meet and talk to somebody in Asia around FinTech or around innovation in general, their level of awareness of what's going on in Asia or what's going on in the world is remarkably different or much higher to that of the average Kiwi innovator. I think we have a very high risk of innovating inside a New Zealand ecosystem for New Zealand with the intention that New Zealand is the first place to innovate, which is absolutely really cool. But if we're not aware of what's going on in Hong Kong and US and Europe and the Middle East and what have you, then we have a very high risk of having a very, very limited scope for that innovation and in terms of global market. So I think That's why part of what FinTechNZ tries to do is to really develop these strong international connections. And our very first initiative Binu was a very key instrumental person in trying to making this happen. Was straight away after 6 weeks of launching FinTechNZ, we were able to host a FinTech delegation that came over from the UK, and that was an amazing engagement. So we're looking forward to try and do more and more of those to kind of open and connect Kiwi innovators much more with the rest of the world.
One very quick question and a quick answer, please, because we've got lunch not far away. So there's a couple of questions that are really interesting. How do the regulators feel about Bitcoin in client portfolios? And not unlinked to that exactly is how does tax play a role in terms of the return if you're getting a return in Bitcoin or something? So there's a couple of interesting sort of like little questions there.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, current New Zealand sort of regulations say that essentially you treat Bitcoin as like a foreign currency. So same rules, and you just there's a bit more honesty involved because it's easier to hide.
Sure. Yes.
And we for our conference we accepted Bitcoin, and about 40 people paid by Bitcoin went straight into my wallet. And yes, I've got to declare that and declare GST on that. I'll somehow work out how to do it into zero, and it's just like foreign currency.
Yes.
Can I just add very quickly, just a just a real life example that's kind of funny. There's a really awesome cryptocurrency company, a startup that's just been around for a year and a half, and it's done extremely well. It's done amazingly well with its growth rate, based in Christchurch in Canterbury, and kind of sometime during the last sort of 18 months of them kind of coming into existence and setting up their business, they made a phone call to the IRD's call center and said, "Oh, this is the business that we're in cryptocurrency. There are what are our tax kind of compliance that we have to comply with." And whoever it was received a call at the IRD call center and said, "You're not listed on our tax list, so no, you don't have to pay tax."
Wow.
Got it.
Maybe we found a solution.
And this is real life example. The company exists today, and since then they've organised a meeting with MB and FMA to kind of get a better understanding of what the New Zealand environment and compliance.
So maybe it is a new asset class to be introduced into asset allocation. Good tax managed investment. Yeah.
But just to add to Mark's point of this parallel world, at some point these two have to connect.